build with the boys. Excited because we finally got parts 7 and 8 of the Titanic. On this video we're building part 7, and this is what we got. So we got a very lovely magazine and we got a box of bits, but we also got something else at this delivery. We got our first binder. Is what it is, but I mean, it's a nice way to keep these magazines together because I don't really go into the magazine much, but there is some nice sort of like factoids and some good pictures of the Titanic and some information about what was happening in the world at the time. It's a good thing to have, so I will be holding on to these, so I'm going to use these binders. In this one, we are building a catwalk for the engine. So there's not loads to do in this one, but yeah, it's going to make an impact on that engine because it gives you an idea of how big it is. Because on the parts that are added into the engine today include the ladders. Because it's easy to look at these things and not really judge the scale. You know, this is a scale of 1/200th. So this engine is 200 times bigger than the one we're actually building. But this thing was gargantuan. I mean, it was massive. The engines were huge. So you needed ladders to climb up these things. Massive. So it's going to be nice. I love this engine as well. It's a gorgeous thing. For those of you sticking around after for our history lesson, we're going to be talking about the unsinkable Molly Brown. Who is the unsinkable Molly Brown? And who really was the unsinkable Molly Brown? So if you're sticking around for that, that'll be good. If you haven't yet, please give us a like. Give us a subscribe and you'll be able to see Titanic from literally start to finish because we're going all the way to the end on this one. Helps our channel massively. Costs you nothing. And is very much appreciated. So without further ado, let's get into the bit and let's get this built. So let's see what we're working with. This is the engine that we've built so far. I just love this thing, man. It's you can see all the pistons working. Gorgeous. So we're going to be adding a piece to here to make this thing stand as it should be. So here are the parts. Now again, Hachette appear to be sticking with the little cardboard box, and I love this. Well done, Hachette. Good thing. Because, you know, the amount of single-use plastic crap thrown into our environment. So if we can have this in just little cardboard boxes, that's brilliant. I mean, this is the next thing. Get rid of these little bags. Don't need that. But I like this. These things come tissue wrapped. What else have we got? Is that it? Nope, there is another piece in there. There we go. 2 more pieces. Okay. So let's see what we're dealing with. Okay, so we have plastic piece. We have, this is a brace piece. We will be adding a bit to the bow, and then we have this metal piece as well. Okay, so these are the pieces that we get with issue number 7. So we won't be using that one for now. We're going to be adding these 2 parts to the engine, and we've got a lot of screws here. So let's have a look what we're doing and get it put together. It's quite simply, we're going to take this section here. You can see the ladders here. We'll have a proper look at that at the end. But making sure your gear's at this end, it's going to slot in here, and there are lugs that will hold it in place where it needs to go. And that's it. Now we're just going to secure this in place with 4 EM screws. Nice and simple, this one. Now, because these are EM, the M stands for metal, so it's telling us that this is going into metal. So I am going to use the old 3-in-1 trick and just a touch of oil on the tip of these screws, just to ease the transition in, because I don't want to be doing the screw in, screw out technique. It's too much messing around. Just use your 3-in-1, but don't go mad with it, because you don't want it staining everything. Oh, my aging eyes. There we go. Okay, so that's one. I do like this Titanic. It's got to be said. I really like it. Now, I know some people have got concerns about some of the things that we've seen so far, but come on now. I mean, we are 8 parts in to a 120 part build. Now I know one view could be, well, you know, it's got the word early doors, or another way to look at it, it could be, we're that early in, should you really be panicking just yet? There's been some panic about the yellow stripe that appears along the Titanic, because you will see in part 8 when we get to that, that it doesn't appear on the new parts that we've got. Now, I'm not particularly worried about that because, I mean, who knows what they're going to do? It could be a water transfer. It could be, I don't know, a decal. It could be a piece that attaches. I don't know. But look, what's the worst case scenario, right? In the very unlikely event that they have omitted this from the build, I don't know why they would, but in the very, very unlikely event that that is the case, we're going to get some masking tape. We're going to get some paint that we like, and we're just going to paint a strip along the bloody boat. That's all we're going to do. So it's not worth panicking about just yet. So let's just wait and see. I mean, again, kind of with a steam generator, let's just wait and see what happens. Let's chill. I know it's easy to get sort of antsy about these things, but let's wait and see what happens. So that's that part in. So there we go. So we have, you can see here now, we have the ladders coming off this part. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to flip this back over, and we're going to take our metal part, which bizarrely is now going to be held with plastic screws, I believe. And we are going to, I've got to make sure I put this in the right way around. Yeah, this way around. Okay. Is going to, like that. There we go. That's going to sit in place there. And we are going to put this in with 6 AP screws and 4 FM screws. Now, I'm not going to bore you watching me put 8 screws in, so I'm going to crack on, do that. We'll take a look at it at the end. And there we are. So this is now got a catwalk added to the engine. So the engine's now got a base to sit on. So instead of, we've all been storing it that kind of way, I think. Well, now we don't have to. We can store it the correct way. And you can see, it's a gorgeous thing. It really is. And yeah, I love this, man. I just do. And it's all working. You can see it's turning there. Gorgeous. So that's as it should be. Happy with that, really am. And now we are going to move on to our parts for the bow. Here we have our section of the bow. Now, the first thing we are going to do is we're going to move the nameplate. So glad I didn't glue that, because I was gonna. I'm really glad I didn't. So we're going to flip this one over, and we are going to add this part. It's just going to go in there. There we go. That's where it's going to line up. There we go. And we are going to hold this in place with BP screws. And then we're going to be coming in from the opposite side. So let's get those ready, and we'll start screwing this into place. Okay, so this is where we're going in. So we're just going to pop one in on this. You can see it. Pop one in here. Again, we're just going as plastic, so there's no need to use oil on this. That's the first one in. We've got 2 more to go, and then we are done with this issue. But yeah, it's again, there's a lot of, I know you've got concerns, but don't panic just yet. Let's see where we're going with this. And if, I mean, again, I'm not going to defend the indefensible. If this thing is an absolute train wreck, then I'll agree with you. But I think we're too early doors, man. We're on, we're on issue 8. Issue 7. Speaking of which, number 8 is the last one of fortnightly availability, and then it becomes weekly. Now, because I'm subscribing, I still will get my monthly, but it means instead of having to wait a month and just getting 2 turn up, it will be a case of getting 4. So we are going to start accelerating after number 8. That's it. That's in. That's done. Then the last thing we need to do is pop the Titanic plate back on. And this time I'm thinking I am going to glue it, because I just don't trust how this thing goes on. I can't see that ever staying on there. There we go. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Maybe that's helped. But there we are. So that is that part in and complete. So we can see where our forecastle is going to sit on this thing now, really. I mean, that's what that's ultimately going to support, I guess. But yeah, there we are. So that is that one done. Let's have a chat. So that is number 8 complete. Nice and easy, nice and simple, quick one. Which is a good thing and a bad thing, because it's over too quick. Sorry, I keep calling number 8. Number 7, brief flirtation. We're kind of in and out. So that's where we are now. So we've got this piece in here, which is a support bracket for that, and our engine just continues to grow. There's still a lot more to do with this. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. If you are just stopping by for the instructions, well, thanks for coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But if you are sticking around for our history lesson, we are going to be talking about the unsinkable Molly Brown. Now, the unsinkable Molly Brown is a myth. It's a Hollywood character that's been made up for musicals and TV shows and dramas, movies, you name it. That's the best way you can describe the unsinkable Molly Brown, because she is based on an actual woman, but the portrayal of Molly Brown in media really isn't who she was. Because typically what you get whenever they make a Titanic movie, TV show, play, whatever, it's this kind of sassy southern girl, you know, is razzling the men, and you know, she's a little bit rough and ready and mouthy, and that really wasn't her at all. Wasn't. It's a plot device. That's all it is. It's because everybody on board Titanic's very prim and proper, or they're in steerage and out of sight. So she's a plot device to make movies and stories and books more interesting, which discredits largely who she was based on. And she was based on Margaret Brown. No one ever called Margaret Brown Molly Brown. Her friends and her loved ones called her Maggie, but she was never called Molly. That didn't come about till after her death. And why Molly Brown? Well, because they made a musical called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And what rhymes with Molly? Jolly, holly, golly, folly, lolly. Nice things. What rhymes with Maggie? Draggy, baggy, saggy, haggy. It really was that simple, right? It just hit the ear better. The Unsinkable Molly Brown. It's a great name. It's a great name. But it's not the woman. So let's talk about the actual woman. Let's talk about Margaret Brown. Here's a picture of her, so you know who we're talking about. So that's her. That's the lady we're going to be speaking about. And her name was Margaret Brown. But before that, she was born Margaret Tobin in 1867. And she was born in Hannibal, Missouri, to Irish immigrant parents. Now, Hannibal, Missouri was a largely Irish immigrant town at the time. So her parents were very much part of that social scene, but it was a social scene of people that you know, lived in poverty. That's the reality of it. But she had very progressive parents that had views that were unusual for the time. They encouraged education, and they encouraged culture as well. So even though they didn't have much money, Maggie Brown did get culture, and she sort of learnt the importance of society. We'll come into that. But I mean, they were poor, so she became a factory worker at age 13, and it was long hours for very little pay, and she wanted more. She wanted more from life. She didn't really get that at first. She left Hannibal, Missouri when she was 18 years old, and she headed to Colorado. At the time, a lot of people go to Colorado because of the gold rush. So it attracted a lot of people. So at the time, it seemed like the place of opportunity, Colorado, and that's where she went. Now, she wasn't mining. She ended up working in a department store. Her brother was living down there, and they lived in a cabin together. They kind of shared, so when he was doing night shift, she slept. When he came home, she went out to work and he slept, and they struggled. But even through her struggles with finance at the time, she still devoted a lot of her time to charitable causes and also volunteered at a soup kitchen. It's a decent thing to do, you know, and that gives you a tiny glimpse of the woman she was going to become. When she was 19, she met the 31-year-old J.J. Brown, who was actually a customer at her department store. And he took a liking to her, and they started dating, and they dated throughout the summer of 1886. A year after Doc Brown arrived in the Old West, but that's a different build. And they were married that year. They got married in September 1886. Times were different back then. I mean, now I've known people that have been engaged for 15 years, but courtships back then were quick. I mean, some 2 weeks, 4 weeks. But she married J.J. Brown. Now, she always said that she planned to marry into money. That was her plan, that she wanted to marry somebody that would be able to pay for her parents' medical bills and take care of her financially. And she wouldn't have to grind away in a factory for very little money and the kind of the poverty misery that comes with it. But, and this is her quote, she said, I decided that I'd be better off with a poor man whom I loved than a man I was only attracted to for his money. So I married Jim Brown. And Jim Brown was broke. Okay, so Jim Brown she didn't marry money. Jim Brown was broke. He was a miner that had had very little success in mining. The silver rush, originally in Colorado, had just bottomed out. There was no silver there anymore. But, as luck would have it, JJ struck gold. In 1893, JJ struck gold. So Margaret Brown would have been 26 years old at this point. They'd been married 7 years. He struck gold, and literally overnight, they became millionaires. Overnight. Which is insane. But he struck gold, a massive vein of gold at the Little Johnny mine. And yeah, next thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. And it changed Margaret's life, but she didn't want it to change her ethics or her morals. So she became a socialite. It was kind of, you know, I mean, she wasn't anti-money, you know, she could have carried on working at the department store, but she didn't. She became a socialite, but she saw it as a burden. But to be the wife of a millionaire back then, times were different. So women, you know, kind of had their place at the time, wrongly, but that's the way it was. I mean, the suffrage movement hadn't fully took pace yet, and she dedicated a lot of her time to that. Philanthropy was a big thing for her, but she was also conscious of her standing, being nouveau riche, new money. She was very aware of that, so she took it upon herself to gentrify, if you will. So she learned about art, and she learned about languages and literature, and she consumed this stuff to you know, she wanted to not just be able to hold her own against some of the snobbier women of the town, but also, I mean, education's good. You should learn about these things. You don't have to like them, but you should be aware of them. You know, it's like, even if you don't like art, you should still be aware of it. You should have a slight education about it, and, you know, be aware it's a thing that other people are interested in. And that's what she did. But she was never accepted by Denver society, and I think this is a bit where the myth comes from. So there was a society in Denver called the Sacred 36, and it was the socialite ladies of Denver, and she was never allowed to join. She was just going to get blackballed every time she tried to join, because they saw her as new money. That's what it was. It wasn't that she was uncouth. It wasn't that she was, you know, loudmouthed, which is the media sort of idea of her. That wasn't her at all. It was purely she was new money. But she could have bought and sold all of them at a loss and still been a millionaire. That's how much money she had. And I think there was a little bit of jealousy about that. They kind of saw, there's no way we're letting this chick in here. Well, this is us. We're from good breeding. And it's like, yeah, but again, she could buy and sell all your asses and still be worth more than all of you. So they never let her in. And it did put a claw in her side. She didn't like that. But it was what it was. She ran for Senate in 1901, amazingly, but stepped out of the race the day before the election. Now, there's some and ahhing about why she stepped out of the race. Now, the belief is that Jim Brown was very old school in his approach, and I think he was getting razzed a little bit by his fellow men about, wow, your wife really is going to be a bigger deal than you are. And I believe that was part of the reason why she dropped out of the race. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But yeah, sadly, that might be the truth, and it probably was the truth. But it's yeah, it just spurned her on a little bit more for what's to come later in life. And they travelled together as well. They were very much in love. I mean, don't let what I've just said make you think they hated each other. They didn't. They were very much in love. They travelled the world. They went to Russia. They went to China. They went to Japan. They went to India, and whilst they were travelling, she took up writing, and she wrote travelogues as well. And she was very interested, in particular, in the Indian caste system, because, again, being kind of a socialist at heart, she was very interested in that, and she wrote a lot about it. And you can still see those writings, that they're available online today. In 1909, they parted ways, but they never divorced, but they separated. It just wasn't, it was not a romantic marriage, but they loved each other right up until the end. They still loved each other. They just made the decision that, you know, you go your way and I'll go my way, but I'm always going to love you. Sweet, really. She was given allowance so she could carry on her philanthropy, so she had a cash allowance, and it wasn't that either of them were interested in being with anybody else. They just, you know, didn't think they brought the best out in each other anymore. So Maggie Brown carried on with her philanthropy and doing what she could do and being an advocate for social justice. And she was visiting Paris with her daughter when she got news that her grandchild had taken ill. So she had to get back to New York quickly. So she made an emergency booking on the first vessel that was leaving for New York, which happened to be the Titanic. She got a first class ticket on the Titanic. So she joined the Titanic at France. She wasn't on it when it left the UK. She was on it when it got to France. And we all know what happened next. So Maggie Brown was, she was on board the Titanic, and there's no real mention of her in any of the what she got up to in the while she was on the Titanic from when she got off it. So a lot of the ladies were taken aback by it. Bullshit, that didn't happen. There's no document of that at all. But she was on lifeboat number 6. But before she got on lifeboat number 6, she helped other people onto lifeboats before being convinced to get on the boat. Because, again, that was kind of her demeanour. That was her personality. She was helping others first, but until she was told, get your ass on the boat. So she got on lifeboat number 6. Now, lifeboat number 6 was being controlled by Quartermaster Robert Hitchens. We're going to talk about him, but we'll come back to him. This is about her for now. Quartermaster Robert Hitchens was in charge of lifeboat number 6, which Maggie Brown was on. And it was criminally undermanned. There was... Okay, so there's debate about how many they could hold and how many were on it. So they think that those lifeboats could have held up to 65 passengers. Probably 60 comfortably, but 65 passengers. Lifeboat number 6 left with, again, there is debate on how many people are on lifeboat number 6, but the figure that gets banded around the most is 36 people. So there were 36 people on a boat that potentially holds 65 people when you already had a shortage of boats. Robert Hitchens didn't wait for any more. He decided it was full and off he went. So there was 36 people on board a boat that 29 more people could have been on. So that's 29 souls that died on the Titanic that could have been saved. Could have been in that boat. They could have. There's no debate about that. That's 29 people that needlessly died on board that boat. So off they went, and they were rowing away, and they were told to row towards the lights of the ship they could see in the distance, which turned out to be the Carpathia. Well, again, it might not be the Carpathia, but that's a story for another day. But they rowed towards the lights, and Maggie Brown, realizing that how many seats were free in the boat, urged them to turn around and go back. We've got room. We can take more people in this boat, and she got into it with Robert Hitchens. And again, I think this is where this kind of brash Molly Brown comes from, because that wasn't her at all. She just knew that what was happening was wrong. There were room in the boat for more people. So she got into it, Robert Hitchens, telling him, you need to turn around and go back. You could hear the people screaming, we need to go back for them. Now, I understand where he was coming from, because his argument was, if we go back, they'll grab the boat and they'll pull us in. Maybe. I mean, if once your ass was in that water, you were in no real condition to tip a boat over. But I get his point. But the reality is, he shouldn't have left with an empty frigging boat, should he? So Maggie Brown got into it and threatened him. She told him, I will knock you out with this oar and dump your ass over the side and row it back myself. But realising that who she was in the boat with were kind of first-class socialites and children, there's no way she could row a boat back on her own back to the Titanic to get people on board. And soon had to relent to the fact that it wasn't going to happen. She was saved by the Carpathia along with others, but she immediately founded a survivors committee. That was what she decided to do. So literally the second she got on board the Carpathia, she started founding a survivors committee, because it dawned on Maggie Brown very quickly that a lot of people just lost everything, literally everything. Because some of the people that were on board the Titanic were traveling to New York for a new life and had everything with them. So they'd sold what they had, or had their possessions with them. Their possessions are now heading towards the bottom of the ocean. And in a lot of cases of the people on those lifeboats, so had their husbands, so had their children. So they just lost everything. So what you'll find with this is first-class passengers are always going to be first-class passengers. Okay, they're safe, they're financially secure. Steerage passengers are always going to be steerage passengers. Middle-class passengers suddenly just became steerage, because for some of those women, they just lost the husband that was the sole breadwinner and every possession they ever owned. So the middle classes suddenly found themselves being the lower classes very quickly. They lost everything, absolutely everything. So she set up a survivors committee because she was aware that some of these people have just lost every bloody thing. And not only did she do that, through her travel, she was able to talk to some of the non-English speaking passengers on board to reassure them and inform them what was happening. So she was able to speak German, she was able to speak French, she was able to speak Spanish, she was able to speak Polish. So she was able to speak to these people and reassure them what was happening and what's next, and this is what we're going to do. What a woman. What a woman. By the time the Carpathia reached New York, she'd managed to raise $10,000 for the survivors that had lost everything. Again, what a woman. And it's incredible, because she offered almost like therapy to some of these people that are going through it. She's just gone through a traumatic event herself, but again, her kind of socialism meant that, you know, looking after others was important. She handed out blankets, she handed out food, and it's what she did, regardless of the fact that she was a very wealthy woman and could have just kicked back on you know, a deck chair for the remainder of the journey. She says one of the biggest regrets in life was that she was never allowed to testify at the hearing. So Robert Hitchens' version of events very much differed from hers. Robert Hitchens' version of events paints him in a very good light. Of course it does. He's Robert bloody Hitchens, but again, we'll come to him. Whereas Maggie Brown's version of events was very different to his. I'm more inclined to believe her than I am. There's no reason for her to lie. There's plenty of reason for him to lie, because her version of events, he doesn't come out looking very well, whereas his version of events, he comes out looking like an angel. But I guess we'll never know. She was devastated she couldn't give evidence at the hearing, and the reason why is because she was a woman, believe it or not. So women weren't allowed to give evidence in hearings. She didn't stop there. I mean, the story of Maggie Brown didn't end with the Titanic, because shortly after the Titanic, World War I broke out, and she went to France, and she set up the American Committee for Devastated France, and she was awarded the highest honor the French could honor her with, for her philanthropy in France, because again, she raised money, she provided healthcare for people, education for people, because she just cared about people. And again, what a woman. She also founded the Denver's Women's Club, which was almost like a kind of FU to the Sacred 36. Rather than what the Sacred 36 did, which was kind of social events and debutante balls and things like that, what the Denver Women's Club did was they were advocates for literacy and education and suffrages and human rights. Important stuff, not just, you know, croquet matches. She was a big advocate for human rights. She helped set up the first juvenile court, because at that point juveniles were charged as adults. She helped juvenile courts become a thing. Again, what a woman. She finished her life as a stage actor. Always wanted to act, and that's what she did. So she was in plays, mildly successful. She did some singing, and she, you know, she sadly died in 1932. And there was no eulogy at her funeral. But my God, could you deliver a eulogy to that woman? You really could. What an incredible life. What a huge life. And what a considerate life, because through all of her money, she clearly never forgot where she came from. She didn't. She was aware that she came from nothing, and she could understand how other people were feeling because she felt that way. And she was very lucky that her husband struck gold, because her life would have been very different if it wasn't. And she kind of paid that back. And God bless you, Maggie Brown. If there were more people like her in the world would be a better place, would it not? And that is the story of the unsinkable Molly Brown. Now, Robert Hitchens comes up quite a lot in that story. So in issue 8, we are going to be discussing Robert Hitchens. And oh my God, it's an incredible story, because you're thinking, wow, who wouldn't you want in a crisis? Robert Hitchens. That's who you would want in a crisis. Who wouldn't you want to be your mate? Robert Hitchens. Believe me, it's a nut story, and him being kind of skeezy on the Titanic is the tip of the iceberg, if you will. Anyway, that was part 7 in the bag, so we've got our parts done. You've learned a little bit about Maggie Brown, and next time we are going to be doing more for the forecastle. Bizarrely, we're going back to the forecastle, and we're going to add a section to the bows, to this part here, where the white part along here is going to be added. That's going to be coming up very shortly, because I've got it and I've got it to do. So that will be up very, very soon indeed. That's it for this episode. In a world where you can be anything at all, be Maggie Brown. And I'll see you next time.